Good afternoon. Today's live is going to be extra special. First, because we have an amazing guest join us. And second, we're going to do this maybe bilingual. Well, maybe just the intro. The rest of the interview or the live is going to be in English. Gente, hoy va a ser un live muy especial porque primero que tenemos a un invitado increíble y pues estaba comentando en inglés que quizás lo haríamos de manera bilingüe, pero no creo, solamente esta introducción. Así que lo vamos a hacer totalmente en inglés. But if you don't speak English, don't worry, because I know we have always people from viewers from Mexico, Ecuador, Colombia, Spain, Argentina, well, across Latin America. So, but that's why we're going to be using AI to translate everything afterward. So that way you can understand if you don't speak the language, if you don't speak English. So para aquellos que no hablan inglés, no te preocupes porque ya sabemos que tenemos espectadores en diferentes países como en México, Colombia, España, Argentina, bueno, toda Latinoamérica. Y por eso usaremos inteligencia artificial. We're going to use AI afterwards so you guys can know or understand the whole interview. Y vayan compartiendo con las redes sociales. Hoy tenemos a Veena Jetti. Ella es una inversionista especializada en bienes raíces multifamiliares. Y para que tengan una idea, sus padres inmigraron a los Estados Unidos y ella comenzó sus inicios con single family homes, como muchos de ustedes comenzamos. Pero ella tuvo un giro totalmente diferente donde decidió comenzar o continuar el próximo nivel. Ella es la fundadora de Vive Funds, que es una empresa enfocada en activos multifamiliares institucionales y de valor agregado. Y ella hoy en día ha participado en inversiones de sobre $1,000 millones, a $1 billón en activos inmobiliarios. Es un número bastante alto, gente. Y sus mercados son Texas, Florida, Georgia, Arizona y las Carolinas, donde ella busca oportunidades con alto potencial de crecimiento y estabilizarlas a largo plazo. Y sus estrategias de inversión se enfocan en activos de clase B y clase A. Y en adición, ella es una educadora y una speaker. Así que si realmente quieres conocer a Veena Jetti, quédate con nosotros por los próximos minutos. Wow, Veena.
Hello. Hi. Hola.
It's an honor to have you here. You know that I'm so excited because you have been my multifamily mentor and I have gained so much invaluable knowledge from the past 2 years, I would say. And for me, it's really priceless. You didn't have to share, all the wisdom that you have gathered in the last 12 years. I guess that is your entire career in the multifamily, but you chose to. And that has truly accelerated my progress. And that might have maybe taken decades for me, to do it on my own. And I have learned so much from you that I'm so honored and grateful to have you here.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I'm so glad to get to know you and your family over the last couple of years that we've known each other. I see you more than I see some of my friends that are local to me. So that's very special for me. So thank you for having me. And thank you to everybody for being flexible about my start time. I was in such a conundrum this morning, and just the way you handled it, I felt so loved. So thank you.
No, I'm so honored. So I want the community. You know that I've been doing this for maybe over a year, and the main reason is because Well, I didn't know that the Hispanic community were doing great stuff. I was very involved with the English speaking community.
Yeah.
That was the way that I met you. And I was invited to a Hispanic event last year to speak about multifamily. And it was, only maybe 30, 40-minute speak that, that's multifamily is a lot of information that is very difficult to cover
Yes.
in half an hour. But that opened the doors for me to the Hispanic community. And over the last maybe 9 months or so, I have eh, realized that the Hispanic community are doing big stuff. The other day, I interviewed a guy, Vina. He's doing 5 to 10 flips every month without hard money, without loans, with his own money.
Just cash.
And yeah, just cash. He buy the cash. He do the rehab cash, and then he sell the property at the end. But he's doing everything 5 to 10 deals every month just in cash. And this is only one out of how many, a lot of conversations that I had with other people that makes me think that I have a commitment, I have a knowledge that I need to share with the community, and they need to learn. And that's why we're kicking off with the bootcamp in a couple of weeks. That, by the way, I really feel so honored to have you in the bootcamp as well.
Thank you. I'm very excited for that. One, you're bringing me back to my old stomping grounds because I used to live in DC, and I actually used to work at Tishman. So when I was at Tishman, I was on the management side for, now the assets may be valued at $1.4 billion. And I was on
Mm,
the management side of that asset, which is in DC. So I got a big chunk of the knowledge and education that I'm going to be sharing with all of your people from DC itself. And just coming back to the DMV is so cool.
nice, nice, nice. I love it. So, Vina, let's start. We have something in common. Of course, the Hispanic community comes from other countries, maybe first, sometimes second, sometimes third generation. So, your parents, they came from India, right? They came to the US, and they started the business, right? They started doing single family home. Can you explain us a little bit, how was that beginning for your parents, and then for you?
Yes. So, like you said, my parents immigrated here. They came back in 1980, and they came like many immigrants do, right? With a dream and a hope of a better life, not just for themselves, but for their future children. My parents didn't have us until they came here and they settled down here. So they came here. Most Indians will come by way of either education or work opportunity. And so my dad came here to do his PhD in Colorado, and they came here with $26, and that's it. They didn't have anything else. There was no safety net. Making phone calls back home was like $2 a minute, so they weren't able to call their parents. They didn't have FaceTime. And my mom is the one that actually started our family out in real estate investing. So this was like back in the day, maybe like 30, 35 years ago now. Banks would give you stated income loans. So this is when it was like the good old days of real estate. Okay. So you would go to the bank and they would say, "How much do you make?" And at that time when they were applying, this was like the late 80s, early 90s. My dad was making $45,000 a year. And that was actually like an okay salary back then. Like that was,
Yeah.
solidly middle class for a family of four back in the late 80s, early 90s. Now 45,000, you're basically almost at the poverty line with
Hmm.
that. It's like you can't support a family of four on 45,000 in any major metro now. And so she went to the bank. They were like, "Okay, how much money, like the annual income of the household?" She put like 45,000. And then the bank was like, "Okay, we will give you a loan for $1 million." And my mom
Oh
was
my God, really?
like, yeah, I was like, "I think there's an error in this." And they're like, "No, no, it's fine." And she's like, "The math doesn't math. What? Like, how am I going to pay a mortgage on $1 million?" And they were like, "Oh, lots of people do it." And they put people into these balloon products, these like arm products. And my mom was like, "Okay, well, can I buy more than one house with $1 million?" And they were like, "Sure." So then my mom had this idea, let me go and buy 5 houses worth $200,000 each instead of buying one house worth $1 million for our family to live in. So she bought the 5 houses, 200,000 each, and they were like fix and flip type houses that she was going to do the Burr method on. And but she didn't have to refinance it. So she bought them, and back then they would loan you 110% of the value of the home. So if you were buying $100,000 house, they would give you 110,000 for like redecoration budgets. So you didn't have to bring house or money to put down on houses that you were buying. So she did that 5 times and rented out all the other houses, and that was how my family got their start in real estate. So now she was offsetting all of my dad's taxable income with depreciation, and we were collecting rent. Maybe she was making like 3, 4, $500 per house per month. And so she was contributing to the household in that way. And someone else is paying down the mortgage. So we're building equity in the homes. And eventually those houses, and my mom ended up buying houses that would be my sister and my college fund. And then when we got to college, the plan was to sell the houses and use that money to pay for college for myself and my sister. But by the time we got to college, interest rates were so low that my parents were like, we know about leverage, we know how to do it well. Why don't we, instead of going and selling an appreciating asset that's cash flowing, why don't we go and take out a student loan at like 3% or 2.5%? It was so low. And we'll just pay that down from the cash flow we get from the house. So my parents ended up keeping the houses for a long time. I know I want $1 million loan with a 40K income too. Let me go back. So
Well,
that,
that is so cool. So I didn't know that story. I knew that your mom, she started the business, but I didn't know that it wasn't on purpose, right? She just got this $1 million and she got the idea. Okay, so let's use it.
yeah. And back then they didn't have the internet. So it wasn't like you could go and join a community or find Alexis Jimenez's Instagram and learn everything you need to know about this or ask you questions. So she would like go to the library and rent out physical books on this, and then go to these like networking events that they would have, and she would meet with like tax professionals and real estate professionals, and she would learn from them what they were doing and what they knew so that she could aggregate that knowledge and then go out and do this. So it was significantly harder back then from a knowledge and accessibility standpoint.
Interesting. And I remember having a conversation with you. You told me that your first deal,
Mhm.
it was $1 million deal, 1.2, something like that, right?
Oh, well, $1.2 million raise. It was a $15.9 million You're talking
Oh, I
about
didn't know
the
that.
first multifamily deal.
Yeah. So I remember that you were raising capital. You didn't know what you were doing, but you made it.
Yeah, barely. I cried myself to sleep every night for 6 weeks because I didn't know what I was doing, and I thought I had ruined my family's financial future.
So, but before that, you tried to do single family homes, right?
Yeah, I did single family for a while. I mean, I still have some single family. I really try not to because it doesn't scale well and it's not tax efficient at the level that multifamily is. And so, yes, it's easier to buy single family. It's a lower barrier of entry, but when you want like true scale and true generational wealth, this is the next step.
Can you elaborate more on that, Vina? And the reason why is because most of the deals that the Hispanic community are doing, it's all about single family homes.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some benefits that you can get out of the multifamily that probably you can get on the single family side of it.
Yeah.
But can you elaborate more on it?
Yeah. So, one, I think a big reason why the Latino community is not doing multifamily is because until now, no one's really speaking to anybody in the Spanish speaking community. And mi español es muy malo, which is why I don't speak in Spanish, but I want to learn more. Necesito practicar más y necesito aprender. Español es más o menos difícil para mí.
But you speak more than that I knew.
You did? I do?
Yeah.
Oh, thank
I
you.
mean, I didn't know that your Spanish was so well. So you learned it in school?
Yeah, in school, in high school. I took
Nice.
Spanish for 2 years in high school. Uh,
Nice.
but I need to practice more. I want to learn more. My kids understand and can speak. because I've always had nannies and au pairs that have taught them Spanish, and they learn some amount of Spanish in school, but no one is speaking to the Latino community until now, which is why I'm very grateful for you, because one of my passions is making sure that families that are like mine, women, immigrants, minorities, that we all have access to the thing that the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts have access to. Families that have been in this country for generations have an advantage. And I want to make sure that we are leveling the playing field and making this accessible for everybody. So some of the benefits of multifamily, one, it scales well, right? Like that's pretty obvious, right? You could buy 100 doors at a time instead of just one, which means you also have less risk because you're not now diversified across 100 different doors. So if one of your tenants moves out and doesn't pay rent, okay, you still have 99 other tenants that are paying rent. And that's obviously an oversimplification, but that's one risk mitigation factor that multifamily has. With single family, and I know a lot of the community that you have is doing a lot of fix and flips, and that is awesome. It is a great way to get started. It is a labor intensive business. I don't need to tell you guys that you're doing it, so you know this. I've done fix and flips before. I know how labor intensive it is. And the reality is that means you're working in the business. You're not working on the business. And that's a big mindset shift when you're getting to scale, right? Like, I don't look to work in my business, I look to work on my business. And the difference between in and on is really important because working on the business means you're focusing on strategy, scale, how to improve, what acquisitions you can target. Like, those are the things you're working on instead of, okay, I need to either hire a floor subcontractor or a painting subcontractor and make sure they get paid and make sure they do it correctly, or worse, do it yourself, right? Because a lot of times when you start out, you're trying to save a dollar or two. So you're like, oh, painting, I can just do that. The reality is when you are not a professional painter and you're trying to do it yourself, yeah, you can. It'll take you twice as long and way more money because you're not going to be as good, right? Um, but when you get to scale, now I can hire a sub to do all my painting on all 100 doors. So now I get the benefit of scale of my contracts, right? Because now a painting contractor is not just quoting me on one house, they're quoting me on 100 units. And so instead of paying, call it $500 per house, now I'm paying 450 or 400 for all 100 doors, and it makes sense for both the vendor and for myself. So that's another benefit of multifamily investing. But I think the most important one, if most of the community that you're speaking to is flipping houses or wholesaling houses, is the tax benefit.
Oof.
It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep,
Yeah.
right? I would much rather be a full-time real estate professional making $750,000 than be a surgeon making $900,000. Why? Because I'm going to keep more as a full-time real estate professional making 750 than the surgeon. She's going to pay way more in taxes making $900,000 because she doesn't have the benefits of full-time real estate professional status. And with flipping specifically and wholesaling, with flipping, you have short-term gains, right? You don't hold it for a long period of time. So you're paying short-term capital gains. And with wholesaling, it's even worse because you don't actually ever own the property, right? Or if you do, you're doing like a double close, you own it for like an hour or two, right? So because you don't own the property, you don't get the same depreciation benefits that you and I get from investing in multifamily and hard assets.
Which is interesting because I have seen, I remember a guy one time asking me, it was at the end of the year, it was like December 23rd. And he called me and he said, Alexis, hopefully you can help me out with the situation that I have right now. And I asked him, what happened? He said, well, I have a $6 million now that I need to deploy by the end of the year. Otherwise, I'm going to pay a lot in taxes.
Yeah.
And it made me think that trying to invest $6 million in single family homes is very difficult. It's easier to cut off a check and invest it just in one deal in
Yes.
a case like that.
Without like, so, and the interesting thing about multifamily is like when you get to the end of the year and you do have that $1 million, 5 million, 6 million, 10 million. And I've had these calls happen before, right? Same situation. I have to place this by the end of the year to try to buy $6 million. No, to try to place $6 million into single family. That is a massive task you're looking at. Uh,
Hmm.
you're looking at trying to find what 15, maybe 17 properties that all underwrite, that all have clean title, that over the holiday on the 23rd, meaning you're losing the 24th, 25th, 31st. So you're losing 3 days out of that. So you have essentially 5 working days because you have holidays to try to get title cleared, to try to get insurance in line, to try to get escrow open, closing documents, the attorneys to move. I don't want to say anything is impossible because it's not, but it is a
It's
very
too hard.
heavy lift,
Yeah.
very heavy lift. And with multifamily, if you call me, I'd say, yeah, sure. Here's the deal. Here's what the metrics look like. Here's what we can do. And you write a check and call it a day. It's that
So
simple.
simple. Yeah. Yeah. So what will you say to someone listening right now who has cash sitting in the bank account, savings account, whatever they have the money into, but is afraid to invest? Maybe they are excited, but they haven't done it.
Yeah.
What you will say in that?
Okay. So I have two thoughts. Okay. Actually, before we go down this path, Alexis and I are not financial advisors. We are not going to give you any advice on what you should do with your money because it's so highly personal. And there are people you can actually hire that are fiduciaries that can look out for your best interest. So this is just education and my own thoughts. We do not have licenses to advise you. Nick will be happy that we said this now. Our attorneys are.
Yeah, thank you.
With that being said, so it's a really interesting moment that we're in because just this past week, the stock market has completely tumbled. Last month, or sorry, a month and a half ago in January, the inflation report came out and CPI is up. Inflation is up by 0.5 point. I think when the jobs report for March comes out by early April, we're going to see. My guess is that we are actually going to be in a full-blown recession. Um, there's a lot of instability globally now with tariffs being on, being off, being on again, being off again, right? Like there's a lot of whiplash happening. Um, I think it is scaring the markets, and I think that's why we're seeing the stock market tumble. Now, the benefit for us in real estate is that when the stock market tumbles, more investors look for safety in bonds. And what that means is when the 10-year treasury drops, it means mortgage rates are probably going to start coming down. So I think we're going to start seeing more favorable mortgage rates, which is great for real estate investors. As far as having cash, I do not think it is a bad time to have some amount of cash available, specifically because there is blood in the water now. There are a lot of multifamily investors that are upside down, that cannot recap, that don't know where to put their money that don't know where to get money and don't know how to pull their money back out. And that's going to create a lot of opportunities for us as buyers. And look, cash is king at the end of the day. The more cash you have, the more you can play the game and the faster you can move. And money loves speed, right? So if you have cash, you can move faster. I have some of the best deals I've ever made are because I can liquidate and have cash available, even at smaller tranches, right? Like even if it's 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, having that liquidity available really can help you maneuver. So I say all this to say, I don't think it's a bad thing to have some amount of cash right now with the intent of deploying it. Real estate specifically is a great inflationary hedge because if you can buy, or income producing real estate is a great inflationary hedge. So if you can buy real estate that will cash flow or can be repositioned to cash flow, then it makes complete sense to go in and invest those dollars. When you leave cash in the bank, especially with inflation moving the way it is, what that means is your dollar is no longer the same dollar value that we had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, right? We started this call out by saying, my dad made $45,000 a year back in the late 80s. And that was enough for our family to be considered solidly middle class. We're a family of four, solidly middle class. If I told you today that I made $45,000 and that was our household income for a family of four, you would be like, so are you on food stamps? Like, how are you surviving? Because everything is expensive. It is very hard to survive with a family of four off of 45K. And that's because of inflation. So if you think about your dollars in terms of their spending power, if you have $45,000 in the bank, 30 years ago, that was enough for a year of your survival and your expenses. And you could probably even save some of that. Maybe it was like enough for a year and a half or 2 years of expenses. Today, $45,000 for most families of four will be gone within 6 months if I'm being like very generous, maybe even faster than that. And so keeping cash in the bank loses value. You're losing dollars by doing that. You would almost be better off investing it into like the S&P 500 or an ETF or a mutual fund of some sort where again there's risk in that because if you invested it and you had it in the market like I have money in the market right now, the value would have dropped. So it's like you have to strike that balance of having cash and investing for the long term, but also keeping cash available for you to be able to take advantage of short-term economic opportunities that are upcoming in the real estate market.
I love that question because it comes from wisdom. And at the end, we are. I use the word require, to get knowledge, to learn more stuff every day. And I guess requirement because otherwise we're gonna fail through.
100%.
The world is moving so fast, and now with AI that we don't have any other option. We have to continue moving forward, right?
Absolutely. And I think too, specifically for immigrant families, it is more important now than it's ever been before for us to take advantage of these opportunities and help each other and do this together because no one else is going to come rescue us. No one else is going to come save us. And I think about it as the daughter of immigrants, right? Like my parents left everything they had, everything they knew, just for the hope that there was an opportunity for my sister and I to have a better life than we would have had growing up in their home country of India. And I always say this, like there is nobody that loves America more than an immigrant. Because why would you give up everything you know, love, your language, your culture, everything that's familiar to go to a random place to not have an opportunity at a better, like why would you give up a good life to go to a worse one? You wouldn't. So you come here for the opportunity. And that's one of the things that makes America a great country is this is the land of opportunity. This is a place where you are not dictated by where you were born or who you were born to what level of success you can achieve here, right? Like someone that comes with $26 can be self-made millionaires. And my parents did that, right? I can go from being the daughter of immigrants growing up. I grew up when we didn't really have that much money. And going from that to now running multiple 7 and 8 figure businesses, like that is possible in this country. And in a lot of countries, that's not a possibility or a reality.
That's interesting. Interesting. So, Vina, talking about the opportunities or deals, let's say, what's the smallest deal that you have closed? Can you share with us
Yeah.
the acquisition price, equity raise, numbers of doors, and what was the largest one actually?
Okay. On multifamily, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the smallest multifamily I bought was a 28 unit in Jacksonville, Florida. We bought it for like 3.1 million. This was years ago and we've already exited it. So we bought it for 3.1 million, held it for about 3.5 or 4 years, exited at around 4.5 million on it. And the capital raised on it must have been around $1 million, would be my guess. I'd have to look at the numbers to know for sure, but we probably raised about $1 million on it. And um, the reason I bought that asset, I normally wouldn't buy that small of an asset. The reason I bought it is because We owned the asset right next door to it that had 100 units. So by adding these 28 units, we now owned 128 doors instead of just 100 doors. And it made a lot of sense from like a growth perspective. And then we were the closest asset to one of the like naval bases in Jacksonville. And our thought process at the time was, let's go and buy all the assets along this road and keep working our way south so we could control that entire North Strip, right? Because you want to control more of the market. So we bought one, and then we bought the second, and then other assets started getting built. And that was a time we were like, oh, we need to get out because we won't be able to compete with the new product. This was 80s vintage assets. So we sold it for maybe about like 4.5 million. Made some decent money there. I think that what's hard about smaller assets is you don't get the same benefits of scale that you do once you reach 70 doors. But that asset made a whole lot of sense because we owned the 100 doors next to it. So that was our smallest deal. My largest deal I've done to date was 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, in Phoenix. We bought 432 units. We paid $131.5 million for it. And that one was a really cool asset because we assumed a 2.77% fixed interest rate for 12 years on it. So that was like a massive win, just getting the interest rate so low. And on that, we raised just a little over $66 million for that.
$66 million in one deal.
Yeah,
That's a big number, Vina.
that's a big number. Crazy.
How long it took you to raise that amount of money?
So we probably worked on it for about like 8 to 12 weeks is usually where we are to
Really?
raise capital. Yeah, but this was also back in 2023. Today's market is very different. Investors are scared. It is much tougher to raise capital. I think if we were doing that deal today, it would have been significantly harder for us to do.
Wow, wow. And you recently closed a deal. I think that it was in somewhere in Texas, right? Dallas.
Dallas, yeah. Yeah, that was a $52 million deal. And that is right here in the Addison submarket. Awesome submarket. We assumed a 2.59% interest rate on that deal.
Nice, nice. And for those who don't know what assuming a loan, what is it?
Mhm. So it's exactly what it sounds like. So let's say that Alexis has a 100-unit deal that he has a $10 million debt position on it. So there's a lender on it. In the single family world, you would call it a mortgage, right? So let's say Alexis has this $10 million mortgage and he has an interest rate of 4%, right? When I go to buy this deal from Alexis, I'm going to look at it and go, well, if I put new debt on it, it's going to be at today's rate, which might be, 6-7%. I've heard rates being as low as 5.5%, but let's say it's 6%. And I'm going to look at it, I'm going to go, well, instead of getting a new loan and paying off Alexis's old loan, Alexis, can I just come in and talk to your lender, and can I just take over your loan and take your name off of it? So Alexis is going to go, yeah, I don't mind, because I don't have any culpability after I sell the asset to you. So Alexis is then going to take me to his bank, and he's going to say, hey, this is Veena. She wants to buy the loan and take over the asset. And the bank is then going to come and underwrite me. And they're going to say, okay, Veena, what experience do you have? What's your net worth? What's your liquidity? And it's going to ask all of these things. And so I'm going to give them all of that. And then theoretically, I'm as strong or a stronger borrower than Alexis was. And the bank's going to go, great. Doesn't matter to us. We're still going to get our payment. We still feel good about the deal sponsors. And then I'm going to assume and take over the loan from Alexis, but my name is on it. So the bank is very much involved. They approve it. So it's a little bit different than sub 2 on houses. So that's what a loan assumption looks like.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember, I think that it was last year, we were in a conference, and you told me that you were, or I don't know if you still are, in the mastermind that only billionaires can get in, or
Amazing.
people that have done $1 billion in transaction.
Yeah.
And everybody knows you as the multifamily queen.
Ah,
So reaching $1 billion in transaction is a huge milestone.
thank you.
So how has that opened new business opportunities for you?
Well, now that you're right, I'm in this mastermind where everybody that is in it, there's like 8 or 9 of us. We've all
By
done
the
it.
way, you are the only woman, right?
I'm the only woman. Yes, I am the only woman in there for now. For now, I want to change that. And now that I think about it, all but one other person is like a white man. So
Mm,
if that tells you about the diversity in this space, it's zero.
wow.
It's non-existent right now. But that's why I want to change it, right? And that's why I do the multi mastermind and I do our Facebook education in that group because it's important to me to create opportunities for other people that don't normally get access to these opportunities. And I will say, getting to that milestone was great. It was underwhelming though because it's a target that so many people just like put on their vision board, right? And they're like, "Oh, I want to get to $1 billion in transactions or whatever," right? And then you look at it for so long that by the time you get there, it's like this is what it was. And my vision had changed by the time I got to that $1 billion. This was about almost 2 years ago. I got there. And when I got there, I was like, this is exciting. I'm very proud of my accomplishments. Don't get me wrong. But what I was more interested in was leaving a legacy behind for my daughters, for my children,
Mm,
to make
mm,
sure that there were other women and other minorities and other immigrants that are in the room and at those tables, not just for the sake of diversity, but because they deserve to be there. They belong there. And diversity gives us new perspective. When we can get new perspective, we can operate in a different way. Like I just read maybe this morning or yesterday, in the last 24 hours, I read somewhere that 90% of rap buyers are Latino. I did not know
yes,
that.
that's correct.
So if that's the case, right, and you have a team of all white men and no other perspectives, if you know that, how can you possibly speak to your audience? But now, if I know that, what my first move, like if I was going to focus on raps, right, my first move is going to call you and be like, hey, Alexis, this is what I want to do. I need someone who understands the perspective of this community, who can speak to this community, right? And I don't mean just speaking Spanish, I mean like actually speak to the pain points and the concerns and the considerations of this community. And, it's the same reason why I don't run a Spanish speaking or a Latino conference because I would not be able to give the people what they need and what they want because I don't have an inherent understanding of that. I can speak from the perspective of being a brown woman, immigrant family, absolutely, but there's still nuance to it, right? And so you're running it and I'm always happy to help support that and to help champion that because I think that this is very important work and I can't do it myself.
Which I love it, and I am really grateful actually.
Likewise, I'm grateful
So
you're taking this task underway because it's hard. It's a big task.
it is. It is. You know that this is my first time. I have been invited to speak into other events, but
Yeah.
it's not the same thing. To go to an event as a speaker to be a host in an event, right? So it's too hard.
Yeah, a
But
lot
anyway,
more
it's fun.
gray hair. A lot more gray hair from running your own event, Alexis.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So for someone new to multifamily investing, either with experience in single family or real estate overall, or without experience, what's the fastest and most effective way to get started?
Partner. So find an Alexis, right? Bring deals, bring capital, or bring asset management to the table. Those are like the triad of multifamily. Bring that to the table. Find someone like an Alexis who is a reputable person of integrity and ask him, hey, I want to partner with you. here's what I want to do. And this is what I always tell new people getting into the space. A lot of times they get so focused on how much of the deal am I going to make? That is the wrong question. The right question is, how do I get my foot in the door with the first deal? Once you get the first deal, all of the rest become much easier to tackle. So the first deal, I've had people come to me and be like, I will give you 99% of the deal. Let me stay in at 1%. I just want to learn. I just want to understand the process, right? Do not be afraid to give up as much as you need to on the first deal to partner with an Alexis, okay? One is partnership. The second, and you know this from being in the multi community, learning the language of multifamily is so incredibly important because multifamily is like an elite tier of real estate investing. It is a good old boys club and the doors are locked. In order to open the door, you need to have the key. The key is being able to speak multifamily fluently. And what I mean by that, I'll give you like a very simple example. When someone talks to me, 9 out of 10 times, I will know immediately that they are single family investors. I should not take them seriously on the multifamily side. And I can just kind of dismiss anything that they're saying about multifamily to me, not because they don't deserve it or they're not smart, but because I know that if they haven't even bothered to learn the basics of multifamily, they don't have the skill set or knowledge yet to be able to operate at a multifamily level because there's a lot of moving pieces and it is very complex. It's doable, but complex. So here's like a really good example, right? If I have someone come up to me, and this happens to me at conferences, right? Someone will come up to me and be like, oh yeah, I'm a multifamily investor. And this, I'm like, oh, amazing. Like, tell me more things. How can we collab? How can I help you? And they'll go, yeah, I just bought a deal and I have 10 private money lenders in there. And I look at them and I go, you're not a
That
multifamily.
single family
Yeah.
language.
It's single family language. So I'm like, either you are a single family investor that just did your first multifamily deal, or you're trying to break into multifamily. When you say PML or private money lender, I immediately know you're not a multifamily operator or investor. And you guys listening at home might be like, but why? Because in real estate and in finance, my degree is in finance. So I got some of this knowledge just from being in my college classes, right? When you say the word lender, a lender specifically tells me that it's debt, right? So if you have a mezz lender, if you have a debt lender, a senior lender, a subordinate lender, right? The word lender implies that it's debt, which means that there is a recorded lien against the property. It is not ownership. When you're raising capital from investors, 95% of the time, you are raising equity. So I wouldn't call someone giving me an investment for equity a lender, right? I would call them an investor, a passive investor, an LP, equity, private equity. All of those would be definitely acceptable terms. But private money lender is not one of those terms. So this is, and now all of you listening, as you're going out and speaking, you'll know instead of saying PML, you can say investor or my LP or my limited partner or my passive investor. You can use any one of those terms. If you say that to me, you're going to give me a harder time distinguishing if you're actually someone who is serious or not. And there's so many words like this that I don't know why they do this. I don't make the rules. We just play by them, right? But if you can learn this language of multifamily, you can really fake it till you make it, and you'll have a better opportunity to get into doors and rooms that would normally be closed for you.
I'm glad that you're bringing that up because that's exactly one of the topics. Actually, it's going to be a full session in the bootcamp,
Love
which is the terminology. Because something that happened in the beginning when I was calling brokers and I was asking for the what's the purchase price or what's the selling price, they weren't treating me seriously. And then I learned that we have to use questions like, "What's the whisper price?" or so "What's
it.
the price of the property is trading for?"
Yeah.
Things like that. And so yeah, so I'm bringing a full session about the terminology. Is I
Awesome.
created like a glossary that
Yes.
these are the words and these are the meanings.
Yes. Yeah. Like, what's the whisper? What's your strike price? Like, if you say that to me, it's a subtle cue to me that you know this space. You might not be in it, but you at least know enough to be knowledgeable and have a good discussion about it. So you're absolutely right. If you're asking like, what's the sales price? They're gonna go, okay, maybe like they're not gonna know for sure. But if you say what's the whisper, they immediately know that you're knowledgeable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for someone, there's a couple of people that I have met in the community, in the Hispanic community. They have done a couple of, small assets, maybe 10 doors here, 20 doors here, there. For someone like that already have purchased a couple of small deals or small assets, what's the best shortcut to break into, let's say, in $100 million transaction? Do you recommend to do this by himself or partner up with someone else, or what other strategy or advice you can give us?
So I think you have to crawl before you can walk and walk before you run. So if you have only done 10 or 20 doors to date, I do not recommend going out and throwing your hat in the ring for $100 million asset, mainly because the likelihood of failure or not being successful is significantly higher. Instead, what I recommend, and I recommend this whether you've done zero or some smaller deals, I recommend that you go after 70 plus doors, 70, 75. The reason being is that 70 or 75 doors, that's where you hit scale to the point where you can justify having a full-time leasing person and a full-time porter or maintenance staff on the asset. If you're like, whoa, Veena, I don't know how I'm going to buy 75 doors all by myself, that's where I would say you absolutely shouldn't. You should go and find other operators like Alexis, right? Like he could help you take down a 75 door asset and he could bring in another partner if you need it. So you could have 2, 3, 4, even 5 partners on a 75 door asset. That makes more sense to me than going after a 10plex or a 20 unit because you don't get to economies of scale and management becomes a huge issue on those smaller assets. So partnership is absolutely the right way to get to 100 million on one single asset. You have to do some of those smaller deals because in order to be awarded those deals, you need to show a track record and you need to have enough liquidity and enough net worth that you can either go to a family office, you can go to a partner and get them to KP or guarantee your loans for you. And Fannie and Freddie are not going to give you a loan if you don't have a track record of excellence.
I guess that another way is create a fund of funds and partner up with Vina.
Oh, that's like the lowest hanging fruit, right? So if your focus and if the thing you're good at is raising capital, then you can approach an experienced operator. Like for example, the deal that we just bought in Dallas, it was 52 million. We had to raise like 28 million on it. And I have a few different fund of funds who they don't want to operate, they don't want to own the asset, but they want to bring money to the asset and they want to operate the fund. Then you absolutely could do a fund of funds. The word of caution I will give you around a fund of funds. You should not do a fund of funds with someone who is a first time or new operator. They need to have experience because what happens in a fund of funds is you are one layer removed from the asset, which means you don't have the same amount of control that I do on the asset. And so let's say I was doing my very first deal and Alexis came and put his fund of funds in my deal. It might go fine and it might be okay, but let's say that Alexis didn't agree with the decision I'm making and he and I have the same level, or maybe he has more experience than I do. Then it becomes very frustrating when you have investors and you have no control on the deal. The way it makes sense on a fund of funds is if the sponsor is very, very knowledgeable and has experience and a track record, because then you can look to that and say, okay, Veena has a history of making decent or good decisions or navigating difficult waters or whatever that is. So I always say, don't do a fund of funds on a first-time operator or someone without extensive experience. It's very tough to do that and have confidence in the deal.
We changed originally we were supposed to do this at 2-3 hours ago. I'm just wondering how much time do we have today?
I have the full hour. I actually might have a few extra minutes.
Because it's been an hour here.
Was it? It doesn't feel it.
Yeah. Yeah, me neither, but I'm just asking.
Oh yeah, I do have another call at 2, so I can be maybe like 5 minutes late too.
Okay, let's wrap up. So Veena, there's a lot of people watching maybe live, maybe they're going to watch this recording later from Latin America. It happened all the time. Hey, hi from Mexico, hi from Spain, hi from Chile, Argentina, and so on.
Yeah.
And I have people approach to me. They want to invest in the U.S. market. They feel more comfortable. There's a lot of things happening in the Latin America market, politics and other stuff. And for those that they have capital and they want to invest in the U.S. market, especially multifamily, what you will tell them?
Okay, so the easiest way is if you have an established entity in the US with an ITIN or an EIN number. And the reason being because if you invest into my deals, I need to have a US social, US EIN or ITIN that I can pay you and report for tax reporting. So that's the easiest way. If you are somebody that is trying to raise funds based in the US and you want to raise funds from outside capital and no US investors, you can use an exemption called Regulation S, like Sam. And Reg S allows you to have all foreign investors. It becomes challenging because you need to make sure, like, let's say I'm trying to raise funds from Mexico. I have to follow the securities rules in Mexico and the securities rules here in the US. So I have to make sure I'm following both. So the more conservative one is going to apply. And we see this a lot with like Canadian investors into the US. It's very common for Canadians to invest here because they don't have as favorable investment opportunities in Canada. So I would say if you are interested in placing money here, open a US entity, get an EIN, makes it very easy for you to put the dollars in over here. And if you are looking to start a fund and you already know all of your investors, not most, all of your investors are going to be foreign, you can call someone like, I think Alexis, you and I both use Nick McGrew as our securities attorney. You can call him. He can set up a Reg S for you to make sure you're complying with securities rules.
And that's very important. Last question, and I'll let you go. Tell us a crazy multifamily deal you closed that most people will not believe it is possible. A crazy story.
Oh my gosh. Actually, on the craziest one, the most stressful close was that 28 unit. Here,
Really?
yes, and this is why scale is so important. Okay, so we had 28 units and we had everything lined up, and I think that was a Freddie Mac green loan. So we had everything lined up and we're getting ready to close, and the lender gives us a clear to close. So we're like, okay, a week from today, we're going to close. 3 days later, we find out that one of the tenants has moved out. So our occupancy dropped below
Drop.
90%. Yeah, and we already had like 2 vacant units, so a third one moved out. Our occupancy dropped below 90%. It was pre-leased, but it dropped below 90%. Now, Fannie and Freddie will not close a conventional loan if you're under 90% for the last 90 days on average. We're 3 days away from closing and we're like, now what? And we have money hard, like we had 200K hard, so we would lose all 200,000 if we didn't close at the time we said we would. So we're like, okay, now what do we do? So we thought creatively, and what we did was we went back to the drawing board and went to the marketing budget and pulled out a $500 allocation from there. And we went to the property manager and we said, listen, you need someone to sign the lease and move in today. Go call every person that has toured this asset in the last week and tell them if they sign the lease for today, we will give them $500 in credits and we'll give them a big flat screen TV, which costs like, a couple $100. So we end up spending like $1,000, get this one person to agree to move in that day to bring the occupancy back up. And we were like, you have to stay. You cannot leave. And we were like, basically, anybody else, do not respond to them if they try to break the lease or move out between now and 3 days from now. So we end up closing the deal. It ended up being a really good, profitable deal for us. But man, the stress around one tenant moving out at the exact wrong time was crazy.
Wow, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Vina, Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you here, and we're not gonna stop. I have you in the next 2 weeks, the 21st actually,
Yep,
in Maryland, with the Baltimore, Maryland, DC area.
yep.
Super excited to have you there, and yeah, it's gonna be 2 weeks.
Wait, I'm so excited, and I didn't even tell you this, Alexis.
Okay.
I'm bringing something special for your people that I'm putting together just.
Oh, I think that Venus connection. Let me see if I can reach her out. Okay, guys, I think that Venus connections dropped off. Let's see if she's gonna get back. She had another call though. Let me see. Let me see. Let me see. Because this is interesting. She was about to gives us something. I don't know what is it, but let me see if we can get her back. Ok, so in the meantime, en el interín, gente, voy a saludar. Hay par de personas, hay par de preguntas, hay par de personas por acá saludando. En lo que vemos si Vina conecta. In the meantime, I'm going to say hi to people that they've been texting, not texting, but comments on the Facebook and YouTube channel. Tenemos aquí. Okay, she's back. She's back. She's back.
Oh my gosh,
You're back, Vina.
that was the worst timing ever.
You know that I was, oh my God, I'm waiting for something, and then suddenly the call dropped up.
That was awful. I don't even know what happened. It just said all of a sudden my internet stopped.
That was cool because we are with intrigued.
I know. I left you in like the most. So I'm putting together a tour, and it's going to be special just for your people. It's going to be, and it's going to have a lot of like points and things for 2025. So everybody that comes to the boot camp and sees us there, you guys will get an opportunity to download that totally free. It's my gift to you guys because I want you guys to have it, and I want you guys to be able to go out there and do great things.
I love it. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Especially your I love your vision, to level everything up, and everybody deserves an opportunity in this country. And we came here to work hard, and we have big goals, and people like you are breaking up the doors, open up the doors and the opportunity for people like us that want to continue this path.
I love it. Thank you. And thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Veena. See you in Maryland the 21st.
Be there. Thank you so much. Gracias. Hasta
Thank
luego.
you. Hasta luego. Bueno, gente, súper entusiasmado por haber tenido a Veena en la tarde de hoy. No le voy a quitar mucho de su tiempo. Lo que sí quería dejarles saber era una notificación. Pues me imagino que algunos de ustedes ya han ingresado al website, y algunos, los que han ingresado al website se habrán percatado que tenemos un conteo regresivo en relación al bootcamp. ¿Por qué? Porque como ya les he explicado anteriormente, hay un cupo para 20 personas solamente. Actualmente tenemos 18 personas registradas, solamente tenemos espacio para 2. Como les he explicado anteriormente, no es un evento, es un taller. Así que imagínense un profesor tratando de dar clase a 300 alumnos. Pues no es lo mismo, ¿no? Cuando hay 20 personas en un grupo es mucho más fácil, más divertido, el grupo es más íntimo, y esa era la idea. Entonces, a lo que voy con esto es que aquellos que aún interesen o sigan interesados, tomen la decisión hoy, no tan solo porque quedan 2 espacios, sino que hoy a las 11:59 de la noche, o sea, al final del día, los precios van a subir. Así que les exhorto, si está interesado, de que tomen la decisión lo antes posible. Así que, gente, un abrazo a todos. Gracias por estar aquí presente. Gracias por ser parte de esta llamada y nos vemos pronto.